Teenage mechanic restores old car, finds letter from his mother inside. What he reads shatters everything he thought he knew about his past. Dear Noah, I hope one day you'll understand why I had to let you go. Noah's hands froze, grease staining the edge of the crumpled paper he had just pulled from behind the glove compartment of the rusted '68 Mustang. The letter was yellowed, brittle at the folds, but the handwriting? The swooping curves of the N, the way she dotted her eyes with little hearts. He recognized it instantly. It was hers. His mother. The woman he'd never met. The same woman who, according to every case file he'd ever begged to read, had vanished after birth. The same woman whose name no one in the foster system seemed to remember. And now here it was. Her voice. Her truth. Hidden for nearly 17 years in a junkyard car he bought for $300 and a favor. Noah blinked, his heart pounding as he sat in the driver's seat, surrounded by the smell of rust, dust, and something far older. Secrets. Why would her letter be here? In this car? Why now? He read the first few lines again, his breath hitching. I always dreamed you'd be behind this wheel one day. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. The words punched through him harder than any wrench ever had. He felt dizzy, betrayed, seen. His best friend Kyle leaned into the open garage door, still laughing about something that now seemed galaxies away. You good, man? You look like you saw a ghost. Noah didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the signature at the bottom of the page, Melissa Carter. His mother had a name, she had a story, and now, so did he. Noah Carter was 17, but in many ways he'd always felt older, like life had pressed fast forward on his childhood and forgotten to hit pause. He never knew his parents. Foster home to foster home, he learned early not to unpack his bag too deeply. Every house had rules, every family had boundaries, and every goodbye came faster than the last. By the time he was 12, he stopped asking the question that haunted every kid in the system. Why wasn't I enough to keep? Instead, he threw himself into machines. Engines didn't lie. Gears either fit or they didn't. Bolts turned when you worked them right. And old cars, no matter how broken, could always be rebuilt. Unlike people. At 14, Noah talked his way into a weekend job at Mac's Auto Salvage, patching up beaters for beer money and old veterans. Mac, a wiry ex-Marine with sun-damaged skin and a soft spot for lost causes, didn't say much, but he gave Noah something rare: consistency. Noah never said it out loud, but Mac was the closest thing he'd ever had to a father figure. Still, the ache lingered. He had no photos of his mother, no stories. Just a last name scribbled on a birth certificate and a single sentence from a tired caseworker. She left you at the hospital, son. Some people just aren't cut out for parenthood, but Noah never bought that. At night, in the silence of his foster room, usually the basement or a converted laundry area, he'd imagine a different truth, that maybe she wanted to find him but couldn't. That maybe something or someone stopped her. That there was more than abandonment in her silence. Maybe there was sacrifice. He carried that hope like a splinter under the skin, always hurting, always hidden. So when he found the Mustang, that rusted shell of a forgotten American dream, he didn't just see a car. He saw a resurrection. Project that might finally be worth sticking around for. But what he never expected was that the car was waiting for him too. That inside its rusted frame, his past was curled up like a secret, waiting to be opened, line by trembling line. It started with a rattle behind the glove compartment. Noah had just finished sanding. The second coat of primer on the Mustang's hood when he heard it. The subtle clink of something shifting inside the dashboard. At first, he thought it was just old junk. A loose screw, a pen cap, maybe a dried-up mint from decades ago. But something about the sound made him pause. He reached under the dash, pried gently at the aging liner, and then his fingers brushed. Something soft, paper, delicate, folded, hidden. He tugged carefully, his hands suddenly clumsy with nerves. What came out wasn't a receipt or a registration card. It was a letter. Yellowed by time, sealed in a wrinkled envelope with the edges curled like old leaves. No address, no stamp, just 3 words written in neat cursive on the front. For my son. His breath caught. For a full minute, he didn't move. Then slowly, he peeled the envelope open. The handwriting inside was shaky, but elegant. Ink faded, but legible. If you're reading this, then maybe you found your way to me. Or at least to the part of me I couldn't take with me when I left. I'm so sorry, baby. You were never unwanted. You were my world. Noah dropped to the floor of the garage like his legs had given out. The world tilted. His ears rang. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a fluke. This car had been hers. His mother's. 100 questions burst through him at once, overlapping, and colliding like a traffic jam in his chest. Where had she been? Why did she leave? Why was her letter hidden inside a car that had been sitting at Mac's junkyard for 20 years? He read the rest of the letter in silence, his heart pounding in sync with each word. There are things I can't explain. Yet. Things I hope you'll forgive me for one day. But this car, it's not just metal and rubber. It holds the truth. Piece by piece, if you look closely, you'll find me. Find me. The words echoed like a haunting melody. That night, Noah didn't sleep. Instead, he took a flashlight and began crawling through every inch of the car. Under the seats, behind the panels, inside the lining of the trunk, and just like the letter said, the clues began to appear. A locket wedged behind a taillight containing a photo of a young woman with his same eyes, a faded hospital bracelet, under the floor mat, with a name he'd never heard but instantly recognized as hers. And then, beneath the carpet under a loose patch of insulation, he found it, a second envelope. This one marked, "Read only when you're ready." He wasn't sure what terrified him more, the idea of what it might say, or the feeling that someone didn't want him to read it at all. Because the next morning, the garage door had been broken open, and the Mustang, it had been tampered with. Someone else was looking for those letters, and they didn't want the truth to come out. The school auditorium was packed that night. Students, parents, teachers, and board members all crammed shoulder to shoulder for the annual town fundraiser and scholarship award ceremony. Noah hadn't planned to speak. He hadn't planned any of this. But as he sat backstage, clutching the second letter from his mother, the one he'd finally opened 2 nights ago, he knew silence was no longer an option. He glanced down at the envelope again. The final line was still seared into his mind. If you ever want the truth to live on, don't hide it the way I did. Be braver than I was. So when Principal Carson called his name to receive the Community Service Award, Noah walked onto the stage with more than just a thank you speech in hand. He stood at the podium, staring out into the sea of faces. Somewhere in the second row sat Councilman Barrett, polished, powerful, and always pretending to be just a harmless pillar of the town. The same man whose name had been all over the documents Noah found stuffed behind the passenger door. His mother had worked for Barrett. She'd been 17, alone, desperate. And according to her final letter, she'd been forced to give Noah up, under threat, under pressure, under his control. And the car, that old Mustang, it had been hers. Until Barrett made it disappear. Just like he tried to make her disappear. Noah's voice trembled at first, but then stronger. I was raised in this town. I believed what I was told, that my mother abandoned me, that she didn't care. But that was a lie. She cared more than anyone. And she paid the price for trying to protect me. The crowd went still. He held up the locket he'd found, the bracelet, the photocopied documents he'd spent the last week compiling. The truth has a way of hiding. Sometimes in metal panels, sometimes in letters, sometimes behind the lies of men who smile for cameras but destroy lives behind closed doors. Barrett shifted in his seat. Noah locked eyes with him. This town deserves to know what happened to girls like my mother, and to the children they were forced to leave behind. Gasps rippled through the room. The silence that followed was deafening, until it was broken by the sound of a single person standing. It was Mrs. Hendricks, the oldest teacher at the school. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was clear. "I remember her," she said. "Your mother. She was bright, kind. She didn't deserve what happened." Then another person stood, and another, until half the auditorium was on their feet, not in applause, but in something heavier, something more honest. Recognition. Noah stepped away from the mic, heart pounding. He had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in his life he felt seen, and somewhere, somehow, he hoped his mother knew. Her story had finally been heard. It didn't take long. By the next morning, Noah's speech had gone viral, not just on the school's live stream archive, but everywhere. Local news, Twitter, Facebook, even a few national outlets picked it up. Teen exposes town official in heartbreaking speech. But Noah didn't care about headlines. He cared about truth, about the name no one had dared say out loud until now, Councilman Charles Barrett. For 20 years, he had polished his image, cloaked himself in donations and dinners, and buried every whisper of what happened to the girls who worked under him, including Noah's mother. But this time, the whispers had teeth. The documents Noah found in the car had dates, signatures, letters with Barrett's name, pressuring a minor to sign away her rights under the pretense of safety and reputation. The envelope had more than just a letter. It had receipts, and when Noah passed them to an investigative reporter from Chicago who drove in that very night, things moved fast. By Friday, Barrett's office was raided. By Sunday, 3 more. Women had come forward, and by Monday, Barrett was in handcuffs, shielding his face from the flashing cameras as angry residents, people who once shook his hand, shouted at him through the courthouse gates. Noah watched the footage on his cracked phone from the auto shop, greasy fingers smudging the screen. He should have felt relief. He should have felt triumphant, but all he felt was quiet. Not emptiness, just quiet, like a chapter finally closed. He looked over at the Mustang, newly painted, now shining in the afternoon light. A restored relic of the mother who never stopped loving him, even when the world had tried to erase her, and now the man who tried to silence her voice would finally face his. Justice didn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it wore oil-stained jeans and carried a wrench. It had been almost a year. The leaves were starting to turn again in Oak Ridge. Same small town, same narrow roads, but something in the air felt different now. Lighter. Like the silence that had weighed on everything for 2 decades had finally cracked open, letting the truth breathe. Noah stood outside the garage with his hands on his hips, staring up at the new sign. Mitchell and Son Auto Restoration. He hadn't changed the name. He added to it, because she had started it, before the rumors, before the shame, before everything was stolen from her. A young woman who had once dreamed of opening a shop where cars, and people, could be rebuilt. Now, her son had brought that dream back to life. The Mustang was parked proudly in the front window, not for sale, not for show, but as a reminder. The letter, now framed inside the office, sat beneath a quote painted on the wall. The truth isn't buried. It's waiting to be found. Noah ran workshops now, not just for teens who loved engines, but for kids who needed a place to belong. Somewhere they could learn more than fixing cars. Somewhere they could find voice, identity, confidence. He never talked about Councilman Barrett by name anymore. He didn't have to. The town remembered. But what Noah did talk about, in interviews, in classrooms, and late nights with struggling teens, was his mom. Her laugh, her strength. The way she'd tried to protect him even when the world didn't protect her, and every time he told her story, it felt like her voice was still here, not lost in the trunk of an old car, but passed on through every kid who walked into his garage and picked up a tool for the first time, because legacies aren't built in silence, they're built in love. And Noah Mitchell was finally done hiding. Noah once believed restoration only happened to engines, that broken things stayed, broken unless you had the right tools and enough grit. But standing in the garage his mother once dreamed of building, with her letter framed on the wall and a line of kids waiting to learn from him, he understood something deeper. Some repairs happen under the hood, others happen in the soul. The Past doesn't always come with clean explanations or tidy resolutions. Sometimes it crashes into your life like a wrecked car, twisted, unrecognizable, and painful to even look at. But even then, beneath the rust, there's metal worth saving, stories worth telling, legacies worth continuing. Noah had been given more than a car to fix. He'd been handed a truth, raw, unfinished, and aching. And instead of running, he rebuilt. Not just his mother's garage, not just his name, but hope. For kids like him, for futures that hadn't been written yet. He couldn't undo the pain, but he could make sure it meant something. He wasn't just the boy who found a letter. He was the man who turned it into a mission. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?